The unexpected intruder. Captain Darren Riker had seen a lot during his years in space. Pirates, rogue eye, even a meteor shower that tore through his ship like paper. But nothing prepared him for this. As he leaned back in his pilot's seat, sipping a lukewarm cup of synth coffee, the alarms on his spaceship blared to life. Red lights flashed across the control panel, and the words "unauthorized access detected" blinked on the main screen. "Not today," Darren muttered, slamming the mug down. He grabbed his pulse blaster from its holster and crept toward the cockpit. His heart pounded against his chest, the kind of adrenaline rush he hadn't felt since his rookie days. Who, or what, had the audacity to hijack his ship? The Aurora Star wasn't just any ship. It was his home, his pride, and his last connection to a life he had worked hard to build. The corridor leading to the control room was eerily quiet except for the low hum of the ship's engines. Darren's boots made soft thuds against the metal floor as he approached the door. He adjusted the grip on his blaster, his finger hovering over the trigger. The door slid open, and he froze. There, standing in front of the ship's main console, was a figure unlike anything he had ever seen. She was nearly 9 feet tall, her skin a shimmering silver blue that seemed to ripple like liquid under the cockpit lights. Her long, flowing hair glowed faintly, cascading down her back like a curtain of starlight. She moved with a strange grace, her slender fingers tapping commands into the console as if the ship already belonged to her. "Step away from my controls," Darren barked, his voice firm despite the lump in his throat. He raised the blaster, aiming it squarely at her. The alien woman turned slowly, her eyes locking onto his. They were luminous and golden, filled with an intensity that made Darren feel like she could see straight through him. She didn't flinch at the sight of the weapon. Instead, she tilted her head, as if studying him. "This vessel is mine now," she said, her voice smooth but laced with urgency. "I don't have time to explain. Leave, or you'll regret it." Darren blinked. Was she serious? "You're hijacking my ship and telling me to leave. Lady, you've got the wrong guy." She didn't respond. Instead, she placed her hand on the console. Darren's stomach dropped as the ship's systems began shutting down one by one. Lights dimmed, the engine hummed to a stop, and the temperature in the room dropped a few degrees. "Stop that!" Darren yelled, stepping closer. His blaster hummed as it charged up, ready to fire. "I don't want to hurt you," she said calmly, not moving from her spot. "But I will if I must." Her calmness made Darren hesitate. There was no malice in her tone, no arrogance. She wasn't acting like a thief or a pirate. She was desperate. But why? "Who are you? And what do you want with my ship?" he demanded, lowering the weapon slightly but keeping it ready. She sighed, her shoulders slumping for a brief moment. "I am Lyrana. I come from a place far beyond your understanding. Your ship is fast, advanced enough to get me where I need to go. And I need it now." "That's not an answer," Darren snapped. "Why my ship? Where are you going?" Her golden eyes narrowed. "If I told you the truth, you wouldn't believe me. Try me." She hesitated, her fingers hovering over the console. For the first time, she looked unsure, almost vulnerable. A catastrophe is coming. A star is destabilizing, and when it collapses, it will destroy entire systems, including your own. I need to stop it." Darren blinked. "What? That's impossible. We'd have heard. You humans are blind to what's coming," she interrupted, her voice rising. "I don't have time to explain every detail. I need this ship to save millions of lives." The alarms fell silent, leaving a heavy stillness in the air. Darren's mind raced. Was she telling the truth, or was this some elaborate lie? And why did she look so desperate, so sincere? He'd dealt with plenty of liars in his time, but something about her felt different. "I'm not letting you take my ship," he said firmly. "But I'm not stupid either. If what you're saying is true, prove it." Lyrana's lips pressed into a thin line. "I don't have time for this." She raised her hand, and Darren's blaster flew out of his grip, landing on the floor with a clatter. Before he could react, she pressed her palm against the console again. The ship powered back up, but not as he expected. A holographic image appeared in the middle of the cockpit, a projection of a star, pulsing violently, its outer layers peeling away. "This is what I'm trying to stop," she said, her voice softer now, but filled with urgency. "This is your galaxy's future if I fail." Darren stared at the hologram, his heart sinking as the projection zoomed out, showing the ripple of destruction spreading across entire star systems. Earth was on the edge of the blast radius. "Now do you understand?" she asked. Darren swallowed hard. He didn't know if he could trust her, but one thing was clear. This wasn't just an ordinary hijacking, and if she was right, the stakes were far higher than he could have imagined. Cliffhanger. Just as he opened his mouth to respond, the ship jolted violently. A new alarm blared. Cataclysm approaching. A goddess or a thief. The air in the cockpit was thick with tension. Captain Darren stood frozen, his mind racing to process what he'd just seen. The holographic image of a star tearing itself apart, its fiery waves swallowing planets and moons in their path. His ship had been hijacked by an alien, and now she was claiming the fate of the galaxy rested on her mission. "Let's assume I believe you," Darren said slowly, his voice edged with skepticism. "How does stealing my ship fix a dying star?" Lyrana turned to face him fully, her glowing golden eyes narrowing slightly. "Your ship isn't just any vessel, is it?" she said, a faint smirk tugging at her lips. "Your Federation doesn't let civilians have technology like this. You're hiding something, Captain." Darren stiffened. She wasn't wrong. The Aurora Star was a prototype, a highly experimental vessel with a warp drive capable of speeds far beyond standard ships. He'd gotten it through less than official means. But how could she know that? "You seem to know a lot about my ship," he said, narrowing his eyes. "How?" "I don't have time for your paranoia," Lyrana snapped. She pressed a series of buttons on the console, and the holographic star projection expanded, showing detailed energy readings. "Your ship is the only one fast enough to reach the rogue star before it collapses. Without it, there's no hope of stabilizing the core." Darren stepped closer, crossing his arms. "Stabilizing a star? And you're planning to do this alone? You expect me to believe you're some kind of intergalactic savior?" She paused, her expression softening just slightly. "It's not a title I wanted, but yes, I've saved more worlds than you can count, and I'm running out of time to save yours." "Convenient," he muttered. "If you're such a big deal, where's your crew? Your fancy alien ship?" For the first time, Lyrana's confident facade cracked. Her shoulders slumped and her voice lowered. "Destroyed," she said quietly. "I was ambushed by my own kind. They don't agree with my methods." Darren raised an eyebrow. "Your own kind? What are you? Some kind of renegade?" Lyrana's eyes darkened, her glowing skin dimming slightly. "My people believe in preserving the natural order. They think it's better to let weaker species perish than interfere with the galaxy's balance. I refuse to accept that." "So you're a fugitive," Darren said, his tone laced with sarcasm. "Great. First you hijack my ship, now you're telling me I'm harboring a wanted criminal." "I didn't choose this," she snapped, her voice rising. "But if I have to break the laws of my people to save billions of lives, so be it." Her passion caught Darren off guard. He wasn't sure if it was the desperation in her voice or the fire in her eyes, but something about her felt genuine. Still, her story sounded like a tall tale, and he wasn't about to let his guard down. "So what's the plan, goddess?" he asked, his tone mocking. "You fly my ship to a dying star, wave your magic hands, and everything's fine." Lyrana stepped closer, towering over him, her presence both intimidating and mesmerizing. "You mock what you don't understand," she said, her voice low but firm. "My abilities allow me to manipulate energy, enough to stabilize the rogue star's core, but only if I can get close enough in time, Without your ship, I'm too late. Darren's mind raced. If she was telling the truth, this wasn't just about her or even his ship. Billions of lives, including Earth, were at stake. But trusting her meant putting everything on the line. Before he could respond, the ship jolted violently, throwing him against the wall. The alarm blared again, but this time it wasn't the warning from the star. "We're being hailed," Lyrana said, her eyes narrowing as she glanced at the console. "And it's not human." Darren pushed himself up, his heart pounding. "What do you mean, not human?" She didn't answer. Instead, she tapped the screen, and a hologram of a massive alien warship appeared. Its sleek, angular design glimmered menacingly, and the symbol on its hull, a swirling black sun, made Lyrana's glow dim even further. "They found me," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Who?" Darren demanded, but his question was cut off as a deep, guttural voice filled the cockpit. "Lyrana of the Radiant Order," the voice boomed. "You are hereby charged with treason against the High Council. Surrender yourself and the human vessel, or be destroyed." Darren turned to Lyrana, his pulse racing. "You didn't think to mention you had a galactic bounty on your head." "They won't listen to reason," she said, ignoring his question. Her fingers flew across the console. "We need to get out of here. Now." "Hold on." Darren grabbed her wrist, stopping her mid-command. "You want me to trust you? Start talking. Who are they, and why are they after you?" "They're enforcers," she said, yanking her arm free. "My people's most loyal warriors. They've been hunting me ever since I defied the council. If they catch us, they won't just kill me. They'll destroy your ship and everyone on Earth to cover it up." Darren stared at her, his mind a whirlwind of disbelief and frustration. This was supposed to be a simple cargo run. Now he was caught in the middle of an interstellar manhunt with an alien goddess and a doomsday clock ticking down. The warship's weapons powered up, glowing ominously on the hologram. The guttural voice spoke again. "This is your final warning. Surrender or face annihilation." Lyrana turned to Darren, her golden eyes pleading. "Trust me, if we don't jump now, none of this will matter." Cliffhanger. Darren hesitated for a split second before slamming his hand on the warp drive controls. The ship lurched forward, the stars outside stretching into streaks of light as they plunged into hyperspace, straight toward the rogue star. The real threat. The Aurora star jolted back into real space, dropping out of hyperspace with a gut-wrenching lurch. The dying star loomed in the viewport, a massive, roiling orb of crimson and gold, its unstable surface flaring with violent bursts of energy. Even at a distance, its sheer power was terrifying, a cosmic time bomb ready to obliterate everything in its path. Darren stared at the sight, his hands gripping the console. "So, this is it. The star that's supposed to end the galaxy." Lyrana stood beside him, her glowing presence dim against the chaos outside. "It's not the star that will destroy your world," she said, her voice calm but heavy with urgency. "It's what comes after." "What does that even mean?" Darren snapped, spinning to face her. "You keep talking in riddles. Start explaining, or I'm turning the ship around." She sighed, her golden eyes locking onto his. "When a star this size collapses, it doesn't just create a supernova. It destabilizes the fabric of space itself. Wormholes will rip open, gravity waves will tear planets apart, and anything within its radius, including your Earth, will cease to exist." Darren ran a hand through his hair, his frustration mounting. "And you're saying you can stop all of that? By yourself?" "Yes," she said simply, but the weight of that single word filled the room. "Forgive me if I'm not convinced," Darren said. "Even if I believe you, why are you doing this? Why risk your life for a planet that's not even yours?" Lyrana hesitated, her gaze shifting to the viewport. The flickering light of the rogue star reflected in her golden eyes. "Because I couldn't save my own." Darren blinked, caught off guard by the raw emotion in her voice. "Your planet, it was destroyed." She nodded slowly. by a collapse like this one. My people had the power to stop it, but they chose not to interfere. They called it natural selection. Her voice hardened. I swore I would never let it happen again, no matter the cost. For a moment, Darren didn't know what to say. He wanted to argue, to push back against the insanity of the situation, but there was something about her, a fierce determination that made him pause. All right, he said finally, his tone softer. Let's say I believe you. What's the plan? Before Lyrana could answer, the ship's sensors blared to life. A red warning flashed on the console. Massive energy signature detected. Incoming anomaly. What now? Darren muttered, scanning the controls. Lyrana's face darkened as she read the data. It's the star. It's destabilizing faster than I thought. As if on cue, the rogue star flared violently, sending shockwaves rippling through space. The ship shuddered under the impact, and the lights flickered. We're too close, Darren shouted, gripping the controls. No, Lyrana said firmly. We're exactly where we need to be. She stepped forward, her hand glowing as she pressed it against the console. The ship's systems responded instantly, the energy readings stabilizing despite the chaos outside. What are you doing? Darren demanded. Preparing the ship for the next phase, she said, her voice calm but resolute. Before he could ask what that meant, the star flared again, this time brighter, more violent. A wave of light erupted from its surface, racing toward the ship. Brace yourself, Lyrana said, her hand still glowing. For what? Darren shouted. The wave hit, and everything went white. When the light faded, Darren found himself slumped in his seat, his head pounding. The ship's systems flickered back to life, and the viewport revealed a scene that made his breath catch in his throat. The star was no longer just collapsing. It was splitting open, its core exposed like a wound in the fabric of space. From within, strange tendrils of energy writhed and lashed out, warping the space around it. What? What is that? Darren whispered. That, Lyrana said, her voice uncharacteristically quiet, is the true threat. She tapped a command into the console, and a holographic projection appeared, showing the star's core in detail. Within the writhing energy, something moved. Something massive, dark, and alive. Is that alive? Darren asked, his voice barely audible. Yes, Lyrana said, her expression grim. When stars like this collapse, they can awaken ancient entities, beings older than time itself. If it escapes, it won't just destroy your galaxy, it will consume it. Darren felt a chill run down his spine. You're telling me there's a monster inside that thing? It's not a monster, Lyrana said, her gaze never leaving the hologram. It's a god, and if we don't stop it now, it will devour everything in its path. Cliffhanger. The ship's sensors blared again, and the hologram zoomed out, showing the entity within the star turning its attention toward the ship. The last warning flashed across the console. Entity lock detected. Energy surge imminent. A fragile alliance. The cockpit was eerily silent, save for the faint hum of the ship's engines. Darren gripped the edge of the console, his knuckles white, as he stared at the swirling mass of chaos outside. The rogue star's core glowed like a bleeding wound, tendrils of energy lashing out in every direction. But it wasn't the star that had Darren's heart pounding. It was what was inside it. The entity. An ancient, shifting mass of darkness that seemed to ripple and writhe, as though testing the limits of its prison. Every time it moved, the star flared violently, sending waves of energy cascading across the void. So let me get this straight, Darren said, his voice tight. You want me to trust you, a fugitive alien goddess, to help stop that thing from escaping. A thing that looks like it eats galaxies for breakfast. Lyrana stood at the console, her glowing hands hovering over the controls. She didn't look at him, her focus fixed on the readings. It doesn't matter if you trust me, Captain. What matters is whether you trust yourself. That's not an answer, Darren snapped. stepping closer. I don't even know what you are. For all I know, you're leading me straight into a trap. Finally, Lyrana turned to him, her golden eyes blazing. If I wanted to kill you, you'd already be dead. I need your help because your ship is the only vessel fast enough and durable enough to get me close enough to stop this. And what exactly do you plan to do once we're close enough? Darren asked, crossing his arms. Wave your glowing hands and hope for the best. Her jaw tightened, and for the first time, Darren saw a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. It's more complicated than that. Of course it is, Darren muttered under his breath. It always is. Lyrana took a step closer, her towering presence casting a faint glow over him. Listen to me. The entity feeds on chaos, on the energy of collapsing stars. If it escapes, it will grow stronger with every system it consumes. The only way to stop it is to stabilize the star's core and seal it inside. Seal it? How? Darren demanded. Lyrana hesitated. With me. Darren froze. What does that mean? She looked away, her glowing skin dimming slightly. My kind was created to protect the balance of the universe. Our energy is unique. If I merge my life force with the star's core, I can stabilize it and trap the entity inside. Darren stared at her, his mind reeling. You're talking about sacrificing yourself. It's the only way, she said softly. Like hell it is, Darren snapped. There has to be another option. There isn't, Lyrana said firmly, her golden eyes locking onto his. You don't understand what we're dealing with. If we hesitate, if we fail, Earth, your entire galaxy, will be gone. Darren clenched his fists, his chest tightening with frustration. He wanted to argue, to tell her she was wrong. But deep down, he knew she wasn't. The image of the entity, its dark tendrils twisting through space, was burned into his mind. It wasn't just a threat, it was a promise. Before he could respond, the ship's proximity alarm blared. Darren spun toward the console, his stomach sinking as a new hologram appeared. An alien fleet. Dozens of sleek, angular ships were closing in fast, their weapons systems glowing ominously. Friends of yours? Darren asked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Lyrana's expression hardened. No, they're enforcers from my homeworld. They'd been hunting me ever since I defied the council. Perfect, Darren muttered. As if we didn't have enough problems. The comms crackled to life, and a deep, guttural voice filled the cockpit. Lyrana of the Radiant Order, you are hereby ordered to surrender yourself and the vessel. Failure to comply will result in your immediate termination. Darren glanced at her. I'm guessing surrender isn't part of the plan. Lyrana's lips curled into a faint, humorless smile. Not today. She moved to the console, her hands flying over the controls. The ship's engines roared to life, and the holographic projection of the fleet shifted as the Aurora star veered away from its trajectory. What are you doing? Darren shouted. Getting us out of here, she said. I need time to prepare for the final approach. Great plan, Darren said, gripping the controls. Except they're faster, better armed, and probably way more motivated. Lyrana didn't respond. Instead, she closed her eyes, and a faint glow spread across her body. The ship's systems flickered, and the engines surged, pushing the vessel beyond its usual limits. What are you? Darren started, but the ship jolted violently as enemy fire streaked past them. I'm amplifying the ship's systems, Lyrana said, her voice strained. But it won't last long. We need to lose them. Darren's hands flew over the controls, maneuvering the ship through the chaos. Laser fire lit up the void, and explosions rocked the hull. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to get as far away from the rogue star and the alien fleet as possible. But he didn't. He stayed, because no matter how insane it all sounded, he believed her. The ship dove into the shadow of the rogue star, using its massive energy flares as cover. The enemy ships hesitated, their movements more cautious as they avoided the star's deadly waves. Now, Lyrana shouted. Activate the warp drive. Darren slammed his hand on the controls, and the ship lurched forward, the stars outside stretching into streaks of light. As the ship stabilized, Darren turned to Lyrana. All right, goddess. We're alive. For now. What's next? Lyrana's expression was grim. Next, we face the entity. Cliffhanger. Before Darren could respond, the ship's systems flickered again, and a low, guttural growl echoed through the comms. It wasn't coming from the alien fleet. It was coming from the star. Betrayal or sacrifice. The Aurora star drifted in eerie silence near the rogue star, its engines humming faintly. The star's core pulsated violently, sending tendrils of energy spiraling out into space. Darren stood at the console, sweat trickling down his temple as he watched the readings spike dangerously. Stabilize the core, stop the entity, save the galaxy, he muttered to himself. Sure. Why not? Easy day. Behind him, Lyrana was working quickly, her glowing hands moving in synchronized patterns over the ship's holo interface. The ship's systems buzzed with life, responding to her touch in ways Darren didn't fully understand. She looked focused, but there was something else in her expression, a flicker of doubt, a hesitation she hadn't shown before. All right, goddess, Darren said, breaking the tension. Tell me what the plan is. And this time, no half-truths. Lyrana paused, turning to face him. Her towering figure, once commanding and intimidating, now looked almost vulnerable. The plan hasn't changed, she said softly. I will merge with the core and stabilize it. That will seal the entity inside. And kill you in the process, Darren said, his voice edged with frustration. You keep leaving that part out. There's no other way, she said firmly. The energy required to seal the core exceeds what this ship, or any technology, can provide. My life force is the only viable solution. Darren shook his head, stepping closer. You don't get to make that call alone. This is my ship, my mission now. If there's a chance to stop this without losing you, we'll find it. Lyrana's expression softened, and for a moment, Darren thought she might actually agree. But then her golden eyes narrowed, and she stepped back, her glowing hand resting on the console. You don't understand, she said, her voice tinged with regret. This isn't just about saving your world. If the entity escapes, it will hunt down my people. My kind created it long ago, and it will destroy us all for what we did to it. This is my responsibility, Captain, not yours. Before Darren could respond, the ship's sensors blared, and a red alert flashed across the console. Enemy fleet inbound. Distance, 5,000 kilometers. Your friends are back, Darren muttered, scanning the readings. The alien fleet was closing in fast, their weapon systems already powering up. Lyrana's face darkened. They're not here to help. They've come to stop me. Darren shot her a sharp look. Stop you. I thought they were hunting you because you were a fugitive. They don't want the entity sealed, Lyrana said, her voice tight. They believe releasing it will restore balance to the universe. They think I'm interfering with the natural order. Darren stared at her, disbelief washing over him. You're telling me your people would rather unleash a galaxy-eating monster than stop it. They see chaos as necessary for evolution, she said bitterly. They don't care about the lives it will destroy. The proximity alarm blared louder, and a hologram of the fleet appeared on the console. Darren clenched his jaw, his mind racing. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and trapped near a collapsing star. All right, he said, gripping the controls. New plan. We outrun them, stabilize the core, and get out of here alive. Lyrana hesitated, glancing at the readings on the console. We can't outrun them. They'll target the ship before we can reach the core. Then we fight, Darren said, his voice hardening. You won't win, Lyrana said quietly. Their technology is more advanced than yours. Darren smirked, a spark of defiance lighting his eyes. Yeah, well, they've never met me. Before Lyrana could argue, Darren activated the ship's weapon systems. Cannons hummed to life, and targeting reticles appeared on the screen. He pushed the ship into motion, weaving through the star's chaotic energy flares as the enemy fleet closed in. The first wave of laser fire streaked past the ship, narrowly missing the hull. Darren's hands flew over the controls, maneuvering the Aurora star with precision. He fired back, the ship's cannons lighting up the void. "We can't hold them off forever," Lyrana said, gripping the edge of the console as the ship shook from another near miss. "We don't need forever," Darren shot back. "Just long enough to get you to the core." Lyrana hesitated, her glowing skin dimming slightly. "There's something else you need to know." "Now's not a great time for secrets," Darren said, dodging another barrage of fire. Lyrana stepped closer, her voice low. "If the entity senses what we're trying to do, it will fight back. The closer we get to the core, the more dangerous it becomes." "Great," Darren muttered. "Anything else you want to drop on me? Maybe the core explodes if I sneeze too hard." Lyrana didn't smile. "I need you to trust me, Captain. When the time comes, you'll have to let me go." Darren's jaw tightened. "Not happening." Before Lyrana could respond, the ship jolted violently. The proximity alarm blared again, and a new warning flashed on the console. "Core instability increasing. Energy surge detected." "Hang on," Darren shouted, pulling the ship into a sharp dive. The rogue star flared violently, its tendrils lashing out like living creatures. One struck an enemy ship, tearing it apart in an instant. As the chaos unfolded, Lyrana turned to Darren, her golden eyes burning with determination. "You have to trust me," she said again. "It's the only way." Darren stared at her, his mind racing. The ship rocked under the impact of another blast, and the core's energy readings spiked dangerously. Cliffhanger. Just as Darren was about to respond, the entity's voice echoed through the comms, low and guttural. "You cannot stop me." The star flared again, and the ship's systems went dark. A goddess's sacrifice. The cockpit was drenched in darkness, the only light coming from the faint, unstable glow of the rogue star outside. The Aurora star drifted helplessly, its systems dead, while the entity's voice echoed through the comms like a chilling whisper. "You cannot defy what was created to rule." Darren sat motionless in the pilot's chair, gripping the controls in a futile attempt to regain power. Every console was offline. The once reliable hum of the engines was gone, replaced by an oppressive silence. "Lyrana," he muttered, glancing back at her, "tell me you've got some kind of goddess-level trick up your sleeve, because we're sitting ducks here." She didn't answer. Instead, she stood at the center of the cockpit, her luminous form dimmer than before, her hands clasped tightly, as if bracing herself for something unimaginable. "Lyrana," Darren repeated, louder this time. She turned slowly, her golden eyes meeting his. In them, he saw not fear, but acceptance, a calm resignation that sent a chill down his spine. "There's no more time," she said softly. "The entity knows what we're trying to do. It's using the star's energy to keep us from reaching the core. Then we find a way to cut through," Darren said, his voice rising. "We're not giving up now." "It's not that simple," she replied, stepping closer. "I can't stabilize the core without power, and the ship's systems are completely disabled. The only way forward is for me to channel my own energy into the ship." Darren shook his head, rising to his feet. "You mean drain yourself dry? You're not doing that." "It's the only way, Darren," she said, her voice steady but firm. "If I don't, the entity will break free. It's already feeding on the star's instability. Every second we waste brings it closer to escaping." "And what happens to you?" he demanded, stepping closer. "You burn out. And then what? I'm supposed to just watch you." "I was never meant to survive this," she interrupted, her tone unyielding. "This is my purpose. My life exists to protect the balance of the universe. If I have to give it up to stop the entity, so be it." Darren stared at her, his mind racing. He wanted to argue, to yell at her, to force her to see reason. But deep down, he knew she wasn't going to change her mind. And worse, he knew she was right. "What if there's another way?" he said, grasping at straws. "What if we—" "There isn't," she said firmly. "And you know that." He clenched his fists, his chest tightening with frustration and helplessness. "You're asking me to just let you die. I can't do that, Lyrana." "You don't have a choice," she said, stepping past him to the console. Her hands began to glow brighter, the faint light spreading across her body like wildfire. The ship shuddered as power surged back through its systems. "What are you doing?" Darren shouted, rushing to the controls. "Reactivating the engines," she said, her voice strained. "I'll give you just enough power to reach the core. Once we're there, I'll transfer the rest of my energy into the star and seal the entity inside." The ship roared back to life, its systems flickering as they powered up. The viewport lit up with the violent glow of the rogue star, its tendrils of energy thrashing wildly. "This isn't over," Darren said, gripping the controls as he maneuvered the ship toward the star. "We're going to figure something out. I'm not letting you do this alone." "You don't have a choice, Darren," she said quietly. As they approached the star's core, the entity's voice echoed through the comms again, deeper and more menacing. "Fools, you cannot contain me. I am the end of all things." The ship jolted violently as another tendril of energy lashed out, narrowly missing the hull. Darren gritted his teeth, his hands flying over the controls. "Hold on," he shouted, pushing the ship to its limits. The core loomed closer, a swirling vortex of energy that seemed to pulse with the entity's rage. "This is it," Lyrana said, her voice trembling slightly. She placed her hands on the console, her glow intensifying. "When we reach the core, you need to let me go." "I can't," Darren said, his voice breaking. "You must," she said, turning to face him. Her golden eyes softened, and for the first time, her expression wasn't one of defiance or determination. It was one of compassion. "You've already done more than I could have asked for. Now it's my turn." The ship shuddered again, alarms blaring as the core's gravitational pull intensified. Darren's heart raced as he struggled to keep the ship steady. "Lyrana," he began, but she cut him off. "Goodbye, Darren," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Before he could stop her, she stepped forward, her glowing form becoming almost blinding. The ship's systems surged with power as she transferred her energy into the core. Cliffhanger. As the star's core began to stabilize, a deafening roar echoed through the comms, and the entity's dark tendrils lashed out one final time, striking the ship. The last thing Darren saw before everything went white was Lyrana's radiant form dissolving into the light. Humanity's savior. The ship drifted in silence, the rogue star now a serene, glowing orb of stabilized energy in the distance. The once violent tendrils of chaos had vanished, and the vast expanse of space felt unsettlingly calm. But the cost of that peace lingered in the air, heavy and suffocating. Darren sat slumped in the pilot's chair, his hands gripping the console as if letting go would shatter him. The Aurora star hummed faintly, systems barely functional after the final surge. But it wasn't the damage to the ship that left him hollow. It was the absence. Lyrana was gone. He replayed the last moments in his mind. The blinding light, her golden eyes meeting his one final time, and her whispered words, "Live well, Captain. Humanity is worth saving." Darren's chest tightened, and he slammed a fist against the console. "You didn't have to do it alone," he muttered under his breath. "We could have found another way." The silence answered him. The proximity alarm broke the stillness, jarring him upright. Darren frowned, scanning the console. The rogue star was stable, and the enemy fleet had been wiped out during the entity's final strike. There shouldn't have been anything out there. And yet there it was, a faint signal, a beacon pulsing steadily in the void. "What the hell?" Darren muttered. He tapped the console, and a holographic projection appeared, a single golden orb of light, floating just beyond the ship. It pulsed faintly, almost like it was alive. Cautiously, Darren powered up the ship's thrusters and approached the beacon. As he drew closer, the orb began to shift, expanding and morphing until it took the form of a figure. His breath caught in his throat. It was her, or at least something that looked like her. Lyrana's glowing form stood outside the viewport, her shimmering body no longer solid but composed entirely of light. She reached out a hand, and her voice echoed through the comms, soft but unmistakable. "I told you, Captain. Humanity is worth saving. But so are others." Darren stared, his heart pounding. "Lyrana, is that really you?" "What remains of me," she replied. "When I merged with the core, my physical form was destroyed, but my essence remains. I've become part of the star, a guardian to ensure the entity never escapes again." Darren leaned forward, his hands trembling. You're alive." "Sort of," she smiled faintly, her golden eyes shimmering. "In a way. But I can't stay with you, Darren. My purpose is here now." He shook his head, anger and sorrow warring within him. "You didn't give me a choice. You just left." "I had to," she said gently. "The entity would have destroyed everything. I couldn't let that happen, not to your people, not to any of the countless lives it would have consumed." Darren swallowed hard, his voice breaking. "I'm just supposed to accept this, that you're some kind of celestial guardian now, and I'll never see you again." Her expression softened, and for a moment, he thought he saw a flicker of sadness in her glowing form. "I didn't say that." Before he could respond, the console lit up with a sudden burst of data. Coordinates, star maps, and unfamiliar symbols scrolled across the screen. Darren frowned, his eyes darting over the information. "What is this?" he asked. "A gift," she said. "Knowledge for my people. Technology, medicine, energy solutions. Everything humanity will need to survive and thrive. But it comes with a price." Darren's jaw tightened. "What kind of price?" "Responsibility," she said simply. "This isn't just for Earth. It's for all the worlds that need help, just as yours did. You have the tools now, Darren. It's up to you to use them wisely." He stared at the screen, the weight of her words sinking in. "You're asking me to save the galaxy. I'm asking you to try," she said, her voice gentle. "You're more capable than you realize, Captain." The golden light around her began to dim, and Darren's heart sank. "Wait," he said, stepping closer to the viewport. "Lyrana, don't go." "I'll always be here," she said, her form growing fainter. "Whenever you look up at the stars, know that I'm watching." The light pulsed one final time, and then she was gone, dissolving into the glow of the rogue star. For a long moment, Darren stood in silence, staring out at the void. The ship's systems hummed softly, the data she'd left behind still scrolling across the console. He exhaled deeply, running a hand through his hair. "Well, goddess," he muttered, his voice thick with emotion. "I hope you're watching, because I have no idea what I'm doing." He sank back into the pilot's chair, staring at the coordinates flashing on the screen. Somewhere out there, other worlds were waiting, worlds that needed help, just like Earth had. Cliffhanger. As Darren prepared to set a course, the comms crackled to life, and a familiar voice, calm, authoritative, and unmistakably alien, spoke. "Captain Rykor, this is the Galactic Council. We've been monitoring your actions. Let's discuss your future."